Kayaaní ستيني لتكت يوهان الشيش هادي آتيك الشيش يغي تي يا تلكتي أيا قنخ يكي قوش إسخن أتشويختو يكي وچين خاستي يا قول ديخ كن يكي سكشوي جنكات كتلك يكي أقا شيت كك أيا وش كنخ كختو داات أخو أوهان yaaw Ḳu.éexʼ. Ajoy shukwaya ach'w dat yuch agach yuch achtatani ya Ḳu.éexʼ. Well, Dísi ya shit kakre wutien. Ya awachwa achadat. Bwegao 1904 away gwell Dísi katichit. Governor Brady ya awa hashil ko has يهسا يسا like يهسا يوسقا يا يدتدخ كشيغخ يسخي Ḳu.éexʼ. Wasa hasta tuwu nik wega ha ani kakaya kesh hasta tuwa ashko ha kusti yach aya ye kakach tustin achchawe kachonach hasta tuwu nik ye awecho ach llingit khashata nakki we Governor Brady ewa wus to take a suk hatu asaku huchi ayi ye awa hastu tundatani ye wutien huchi a llingit Ḳu.éexʼ wega Ḳukitan ayi awa a tlin Ḳu'ul te kat ye dach aya a te has Ḳu'utin sheet ka you do a saku at ya Gwatgin sawe ko a konetsu yawahi wa Ḳu.éexʼ. Ya atlin Ḳu'u ya hadaye wuti dekina tsutskan hastu tuasaku Ḳu.éexʼ. Ya kwakwak hastu Salish atlin Ḳu'u. Ye awachwa achwan ganins we a kach a Dísi a hu owe the kata dawa a kach owe awultini Ḳu.éexʼ yawahi gwal awsatin bledcha hachani aya wukuchu the kat Ḳu'u au jahich de khande ye yawaqa day away Ḳu.éexʼ next day na a ye awe lidzi yidat kho a helwasa kwati Ḳu.éexʼ yakwahi one qanins kho a gwal you do a g just take ayach aya qadna da like atlin Ḳu.éexʼ aya Ḳu'ustian well we adatki qone aya yisqa gwal yisha ye qati shukhwa atawe awajaq gwal quwqan gwal zisk Ḳu.éexʼ aya yawahi gwal we shatkiatsku shatr wusati we shukhwa disnigu aya yawahi qat eight aya ye wutien chashhidig a itch a well we gao du disnigu qanach tashdasa awha awulgas aqa awe a itch Ḳu.éexʼ du qekhant at khai Ḳu.éexʼ du asak aqa awe wush khani aya has tuwasaku wush hat wudashai ya shawat khani Ḳu.éexʼ du asak weta qasagu Ḳu.éexʼ gwal has tuwasaku yakiyat ye owe adatu takhtatan ya Ḳu.éexʼ wasa aya adeye hasawasni ade ye has awsneye adato you took the tank ya shit kak aya aye wuti shit kak ye awachwa ach an gundach we Dísi tan has to khant aya wupoch Qone aya we Ḳu.éexʼ. Gwell has to ani de has to Ḳu'éexʼ. Aqa awe wush qanach wutu da adi. Just has to nach sati in. Gwell lluknach adi yaaw. Gwell ka gwantan yaaw. Gwell kicks adi yaaw. Ye awe ach a shukat yegi X'éig dat awe yeudu zani. Wujin you has qawul atkin wasa atka qone wa Ḳu.éexʼ tin. Aqa awe yan hasu wane gwell qone yakwahihi we Ḳu.éexʼ. Aqa awe Ḳu.éexʼ qone yakwahih atlein at ayak ki at kagi awe awsha at hastu at qone hastu kade ye has awasni. Aqa awe we gao. Ṭhaiqa Dísi tan Ḳawo with the shani chayuk awe wuna. Ye awe gwashwe ka gwantan we kuchetan hasawa ada a joy has to hunt away wujihih we chaynach Yito gesagu tli kwati we Ḳu.éexʼ ye kwati. Wasa wush ya has awudineyan we Dísi tan Ḳu.éexʼ. The cut atlein at aya ye has awda we ka we gukshan tu aya aye wutien akaya has awsahan aye wa ka take guk tasha tuash gut ye wuti a chukana has to asagu we Ḳu.éexʼ ya we he muchi aye in kakwane ka tlaiqa kinach wujinyo kagachtila Qanachawe has to asagu qawakshi Kaya Kaya wuni at wuhi. Achawe Sadu Asako. Gwell George Dalton you do sak and away chago kaw. Gwell naskadusha we do katago. We Ḳu.éexʼ when kanins we ga atlein teq ayak hut has aus in. Gwell klein at kaye wutien. Gwell gone ay a chokti we teq the Katie, X'éig, Ḳu.éexʼ. Gone gachtu hook, you do a sago at Ku a hook. Yadayach, hui, kende we a hook di at. Aqa away we yadu we yadak de ina Kayaaní katu asaru at tade aya ish qaqi. Aqa away ke gachtu hugu. Panachoy hatu asagu a dach ishkeni. Chutle aya a kat yi jakak. Tauk ana tleich a qastatzin den aya kekach tushi. Ye wuhi. Panachoy wuk at. Galchisha qeiti sa achi. Ya yi dat. Gwalti tu asagu tlinket yu katangi ten yuchi watani. Qaqwati. Aqatlet qaqinach. Aqa. Gwalti qaqwawus tleika. Achtu asagu hatiti adat yuchi atani at.
Were you talking about the last Ḳu.éexʼ in Sitka in 1904 that the Ṭhák held?
What did I say about it? Just a little recap.
Something about safe harbor. I'm looking for one.
Oh yeah. So okay, let's get to that part. Yes. So there was a Dísi, which is okay. So we're gonna walk up to that part. So the things that I heard about this, so the 1904 Ḳu.éexʼ, and I was thinking about it because some of us are going to Sitka in 11 days for the Ḳu.éexʼ over there. Huh? Oh, and some are going sooner than that, right? Okay. Well, the Ḳu.éexʼ is happening. And it makes me think of Sitka because I heard stories about this Ḳu.éexʼ in 1904. So at this time, our way of life was being actively banished. Like, so there were government regulations against our way of life. And there were also, sometimes I think about people who say like their way of life is being outlawed, and they're kind of in the majority. And I think you have no idea what that would be like, because our people lived through it on our own land, being told like you can never have Ḳ'éexʼ again. And it's important to remember, like, Ḳ'éexʼ was not just for a single thing. It wasn't just every fall we think about people who died and would have a ceremony for them. It was much bigger than that. They'd have Ḳ'éexʼ for all kinds of stuff. First hunt, first menstruation, getting married, just for fun. Just there would be a Ḳ'éexʼ for all kinds of things. Needed to have a peace ceremony, new totem pole, new house, all these things. There was always Ḳ'éexʼ for it. And some of these things would have different names. So, Ḳ'éexʼ is when a woman comes out of, well, she's a girl, becomes a woman, so she's in seclusion during that first menstruation. She's fasting, and just has medicines and people helping her. And when she comes out, they have a feast of her favorite food. And then that would be a Ḳ'éexʼ, and then she would just share any things that she was thinking about, and then they would talk about all kinds of stuff. They would have him for a wedding. Ḳ'éexʼ is what I was told that one was called. Ḳ'éexʼ, which is for fun. So it was a really huge thing to be told like it was going to stop. So the leaders went to Governor Brady and said, let's have one more. Let's have a last one. And he said, fine, okay. After that, no more. And as far as they knew, that was the way it's going to be forever. If you think about the way things are turning upside down in early 1900s, that's where like everything turns over very fast for the Tlingit peoples, I think. And so they invited people from all over, and people from all over the place came. And this was not just, it was all up and down the coast. There's all kinds of people who like to have Ḳ'éexʼ. And there were some communities that I heard would have someone who would just go watch for, and if anybody's coming, they'd come stop the Ḳ'éexʼ, because they were still going to have them. They would just sneak them, right? And then if they saw someone was coming, everybody would just sneak home and act like no big thing was happening. But it's a really big deal. Like, it's a really, really big deal. Like, if you just went into a community, especially one that was like very religious, and you just said, you can't go to church anymore, it's over, right? Like, just instantly, like it would just, people would lose their minds, right? And so like for our people to go through this, those are some things that I think about. What else did I talk about?
Were you talking about stomping out the grief? Or did I misunderstand the?
Okay, so yes, towards the end, I was thinking like they really like to just dazzle people. Like we've always been into making a thing into a thing, right? And so one of the things that I heard is that there was a person who was very elderly a while ago, is gone now, but was 8 years old or so when this potlatch happened, when this Ḳ'éexʼ happened. And they would bring in, there's different stages of Ḳ'éexʼ, and it happens different in different communities for different clans. But usually there's a point where they bring in a whole bunch of fruit or berries, and you carry in these giant containers. And so it's a big deal when you bring, there's specific songs or specific ways these things are brought in, the way they're distributed, and it's different from community to community. But there's a couple things that are pretty similar. And one is you get some sort of container, a bowl, a big pot, something, and when it gets empty, there's this thing that's Kayaaní. And so that part is hook, means you're going to lift it up and you're going to go hui. And that is the same verb root for doing the release of grief ceremony. So those are the two main verbs. There's one for lifting up an empty container and going hui, and the other is for releasing the grief. So what I heard is they had brought them in these giant pots. I don't know what they were. That's the way it was described to me. And as it started to get empty, and it was full of berries, I don't know, they put them into a bowl, who knows, right? And they told this young man, they said, okay, when we hook this thing, you're going to hide inside this giant pot. And when we get up to the top, when we go, hui, you jump out. And then as soon as you hit the ground, you start dancing harder than you ever have in your life. And we will, boom. And that's what they did. They went, hui, and he jumped out. And as soon as he hit the ground, they just hit one of their hard singing songs. And, and just thinking about like the showman aspect of this and just the performative nature of our people and how we want to, like, oh, they're gonna do something cool. We better do something cool then, and just sort of thinking about that stuff. So that's what I was talking about with that. I think there's at least one other thing. Had to do with Angun. So one other thing I heard about it was there are people who came from all over the place. And the way it's explained to me is if we're going to have Ḳ'éexʼ, you would send invitations. You'd send these runners who would go, and it's called Ḳ'éexʼ because it means to invite the people. There's a related verb, I think, which is Kayaaní, which means to shout something. Because you would go through the village shouting, like, you're invited, right? So usually people would arrive the day before, at least. And all the clans knew where everybody was going to stay, right? You guys are ravens, you're going to go stay in this house, which is another raven house, right? Another raven clan. Eagles with eagles, whatever. And so usually the day before, they would have these tobacco ceremonies. And in these tobacco ceremonies, they would lay out, and there'd probably be some messengers going back and forth. And it's really interesting to me to think about. There's probably quite a bit of stuff where they said, okay, we're going to do this thing and this thing, but they'd hold back some surprises, right? Because they always want to, there's a little bit of competition with some of this stuff. And that's also how you get people to remember, right? Because nothing was ever written down. So you got to do something special so people will remember. And so, but every clan also would coordinate some of their stuff. Like, so when the Ḳ'éexʼ happened, all the orchestration was already sort of taken care of. Like a lot of people knew what was going to happen. The Nakani probably went around and just sort of got a summary of what everyone's going to do so that they could put it into the right order and, coordinate that with the hosts. One of the reasons why you have a Nakani, because if it was a Wushkitan party, all the eagles would be sitting on the outside and on the inside would be the ravens. So you couldn't have an eagle host because if everyone needs to be quiet and listen, because they're all being rowdy and loud and having too much fun, an eagle can't tell them to be quiet. But a raven can, right? It's sensitive, but that's one of the reasons why you have an icon. So, shh, listen up now. You get a little bossy with it, just a little bit. So there was a group that came from Angun, and some of them were Daeshitan. And one of the things that would happen is when the Ḳ'éexʼ is getting ready to happen, everybody kind of shows up and starts getting ready. Or sometimes they're all ready. They got all their gear on. But usually the adu would come out. A lot of times that I've seen it, it comes out right before, like the Ḳ'éexʼ is actually starting, but it doesn't start with a public event. It starts with the clans getting themselves dressed. Usually they're inviting people over, like if we're Llukach Adi, we'll invite someone who's Llukach Adi Yadi to come and dress us, put our adu on. And there's certain phrases that you would use. Like, so you would often like hold up like a tunic or something. You'd say, so say, this isn't me who's doing this. It's my great-grandfather, Bert Dennis. He's going to put this on you. And so this was happening, and unfortunately there was an elderly person there who died. And it was sudden, but it was natural causes from what I heard. And once the host heard about this, they sent someone over right away. And even though this was the last potential potlatch ever, Ḳ'éexʼ, they said, do you want us to stop it? because we will. Because that's how much they respected each other. They said, we'll stop this whole thing. But because they also respected each other and they knew what was on the line, they put áax'w on him. They stood him up in the corner. They said, go. We don't want to stop. And that stuff is all important as we sort of go into Ḳu.éexʼ and we start thinking about that. And it's happening in the fall, it's happening in the spring. It's exciting, I think, to have more of them occurring. Thoughts or questions? I also asked you all to share bring some language stuff, so we'll see what everybody brought. If we don't have anything, that's fine. Thoughts or questions?
The berries, when they rot out, used to be done in large spruce fruit baskets. And there are weavers who still know how to do it, and it was done for a very big potlatch about 10 years ago. And it took 3 weavers together to do it, to make it. And it's big enough to hold, it should be big enough to hold an 8-year-old child in it.
Wow.
And strong enough to hold the child.
See, so maybe it was a basket that he was in then.
And so it would have been done with baskets. They're all waterproof. They're cured at different ways, and this one would have been folded and stored until it was ready for the Ḳu.éexʼ. And there's specific patterns that would have been done for the type of Ḳu.éexʼ on it. Wow.
They know how to da'ak. They really know how to weave with. Da'ak is weaving with roots or bark, and kasne is weaving with yarns. So they get their different verb. Okay? Other thoughts or questions?
They would throw the basket away after the Ḳu.éexʼ. They would burn it.
Wow.
And then they would weave another one every single time.
And what's wild too is they used to have just like industrial bentwood boxes and baskets. And they would just, the baskets, they would fold them down and then they could store them flat in the winter and then bring them out and rehydrate them and get them back going in the summer.
There would have been a basket to cover that basket too. That would have been plain.
Oh, wow.
To keep the trickster spirits out from it.
Okay. Sheesh.
Oh.
There's a whole bunch of vocabulary on Ḳu.éexʼ in the intro to áax'w Nagoyis, which if you haven't read, I highly recommend reading. Lots of stuff about the Ḳu.éexʼ, lots of stuff about ceremony, about speeches, about the role. You know, it's if you really look at some of those old speeches too, like who's supposed to be yelling back at them, and when does that need to happen, and how do you respond to people, and like all that stuff is really important. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I was just wondering, since we had the 1904 last potlatch, or so it's called, for lack of a better term, some of the recordings we have studied in class date around 68, maybe 70. So there's a period about maybe 4 decades where we obviously didn't publicly have ceremony. But at some point around that time, also Alaska became a state. So I was wondering, I mean, was that law ever reversed, or was this left in place, or how did it come about being resolved? I mean, I was a guest, or I guess part of the host clan of the 2004 commemoration Sitka, but that was a different party based on the original party.
Yeah, it seems, I'm sure every community has different narratives, right? And so, like there's one community that drove like a silver stake into the street and made this public declaration that there'd be no more Ḳu.éexʼ and there'd be no more language. And so some of that stuff, though, I think in some cases might not have had a formal relaxation of it. And so, but it seems like they start to happen again in the 1970s, although some communities might have been doing them before that. But it seems like you could certainly look at what year was the Native American Religion Act? Was it called?
1978.
Yeah, so 1978.
Mhm.
I remember getting into a little bit of an argument with someone who was telling me everybody has the same opportunities because it's America. And I said, well, how come in 1978 then they had to pass a law that said it's okay for Native Americans to practice their own beliefs?
Yeah.
You know, was that just random? Was that just something that, you know, I think there's probably a reason for that. And so, yeah, and so after that, and I think in Canada too, there was a potlatch, they call it the potlatch ban.
Mhm.
And then there's a book called, what is it called? Potlatch as Pedagogy
Oh, yeah.
by Sarah Davidson. And she talks quite a bit, and her dad, Robert Davidson, they talk quite a bit about what it was like to grow up, for her dad anyways, probably watching that era come to an end where those things were actively outlawed. And so when you think about it, like it's very complex. And it's not just here, like in Hawaii, when they built their immersion preschool, like the first preschools they built, Hawaiian was the only indigenous language that was at the time an official language of a state. So it was an official language in the 1970s, but it was still illegal to teach it in a school, technically. And so that law, I think, was repealed. But technically, when they're running their preschools, it was an illegal operation, right? And so those things are wild too, to say, because with a lot of Native American languages, they were actively banished. And some of the stuff is really interesting to say, like what's on the books and what isn't. Because I don't think you'll find a federal law that says it's illegal to have Ḳ'éexʼ, but it just became illegal to have Ḳ'éexʼ. Like a governor could just walk, like, can you imagine like if, I mean, we got kind of a shkahadi governor right now, but even him, I couldn't imagine walking into somewhere and saying, okay, Latter-day Saints, you guys can't have church anymore. It's over. Like, I don't think anyone has that much power like an individual anymore. But a governor certainly did at the time, because that's the stories that we hold on to. But it's interesting because you don't, as far as I know, I don't think they're teaching that kind of stuff in high schools, right? Like I never heard about that when I was going to high school. At least I don't remember it, but it would have been in the early 90s. Okay.
So like 1904 would have been maybe like if we're trying to put it in our perspective. So maybe my grandpa was born in maybe around 1904, 1910. So maybe his father might have participated, or maybe his uncles might have participated, like a great grandparent might have been there, maybe.
Yeah, right. Like I just have a feeling that, so we do have folks like what year was Walter Sokolov born? Right now, I'm gonna say it's the zeros maybe. No, it must have been the teens.
1908.
1908, right? So even he's born after the Ḳ'éexʼ stops, and he died several years ago. It was 102, right? And so we could have conversations with him in Tlingit. But I was studying. He was probably the oldest person I can think of that I ever talked to in Tlingit. And so I can't think of anyone that I have talked to who was alive when the Ḳ'éexʼ was, before it was outlawed. But we do have, certainly records of folks like Robert Zuboff. And if we think about this stuff, like Frank Italio, there are recordings from 1899, but they're very hard to hear. There's just a very scratchy recording. Still wonderful stuff. But I think the cleanest recordings, the earliest ones we have are the 1950s. And then you do have recordings of Frank Italio, who was maybe the oldest person that they interviewed, that De Laguna interviewed. And he was probably born in the 1860s. So you certainly have this record of what it was like before. But it's also, interestingly, not very well documented by Tlingit peoples, like what that era was like and how we survived it and how we held on to things.
It's interesting that we don't have more interviews because like both Ḳéig and his wife áax'w would have been alive. He would have been 4 at that time. He would have had several uncles who still would have been alive when he was interviewed by Nora.
Yeah, and like even people like Cyril George was born in the 20s, but he still would have been told about what it was like, because then it would have been banned for, he was born in 1922, so it had been banned for 8 years probably. But still, as it grows up, like people would just be talking, this is what we used to do.
I know áax'w knew how to make Ḳú.éexʼ baskets because she taught Dolores how to do it, and she was born in 1903. So that would have been, she would have also been too young at 2 years old to be weaving baskets quite yet, because that would have been started to be taught in isolation. But there must have been enough use, or at least something being passed on for her to teach Dolores.
Right, so if we pick something that's, I think all religion is probably structured, but I think a really highly structured one is like the Catholic religion. So if like the Catholic religion was like banned, like especially like to put this in perspective, like if you went to the Vatican, if someone went to the Vatican, be like, okay, it's over, Pope's going to jail, no more Catholics, no more Catholics, and no more, none of this. Like the amount of immense, I mean, it's hard to imagine because it's like a global thing now, right? But if that could sort of happen, not that I would want it to happen, but if that could, I still think generations from now, people would know, like, okay, like when the service starts, this is what you do, this is what you say, here's the things that, and a lot of this stuff is probably, they could read from the scripture or whatever, but a lot of this stuff is probably just encoded in the memory of what people do. So I think they could go generations and reconstruct it, which is what we've had to do. But I've talked to folks in Hawaii too, and they said there's certain ceremonies where they said, it's gone. We've just had to reconstruct it in terms of the language and what we think should be there, which is going to be our case as well with some things. You okay? It's cheese. Any language questions or things you wanted to share?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Okay.
How would you talk about, or like, what's the verb you would use to pick herring eggs off branches?
Like berries? Oh, yeah, it is a really good time to,
Yeah, because I've been looking around in like Lears, and then
so well, type in herring, and then we can zoom in so it becomes legible. And this gives us some things to look through. Oh, dang. Never know where to put my.
What is that top one?
Okay. So I think the first thing, just yaaw teen, I would say that actually that could also be interpreted as I'm fishing for halibut using herring as bait. Hitla hat katan, bring a herring rake. I don't even know what a herring rake would look like. There's another thing that it's like, yaaw áax'w, they broiled the herring, catching the broth in a clamshell and pouring it over. That's certainly not implied in the verb. That really just means to barbecue.
Yeah.
Kashak'éexʼ. Oh, cheese. Okay, that's not what I thought it would look like. I don't know why, but I was thinking something of the hardware store.
Just rake it through.
I put in the chat.
Oh, you okay?
Pictures of the herring.
Sheesh.
It's to impale them.
What's it?
It's used to impale them as the boat is like drifting slowly.
Oh, really? So yeah, it's not.
Yeah. Imagine It would have to be such thick schools,
Yeah.
things that don't exist now.
Right. Well, I know one time I was in Petersburg, Sit Kakechat Wutian, and then I got off the ferry, and I was like, it's not raining, but it looks like it's raining, and the herring were running, or just there so much, they were just really bouncing off the top of the water. Then you could certainly scrape them right off, I'm sure. Okay, so we get qauk kakquashaqat. It's an important verb. It means to blanch something. It's how you cook herring eggs, which I learned. Don't overcook them. This is to eat, gobble something up. Wududatsiki would be a barbecued thing. Yaaw, Ḳ'éexʼ. I ate the entire herring.
Or we could use that for a sock.
Yeah, sock. That would work for sock as well.
Just got some.
I know.
Yaaw ashurchut. They're not jigging. They're not rod fishing for herring. Yaaw áax'w. They are raked the herring, which is where hitla comes from. Yaaw Kayaaní. Oh, that's what I saw. They're flipping their tails, flicking the surface. Yaaw X'éig. There are quite a few herring. Now we get to put the branches down. Nich'k áax'w. They put down hemlock branches for herring to spawn on. Kayaaní áax'w. They're going to put down branches in Jamestown Bay. Is that in Sitka? What's that?
What was it called? What's the area? James Bay? Jamestown?
Kayaaní. I think that's in Sitka. It means village in the shadow, in the shelter of the mountain. Yaaw Ḳ'éexʼ. They are jumping, their tails are reflecting light. Yaaw Ḳ'éexʼ. I'm salting herring. I was in a meeting and I was grumpy and I said, I don't know if you would say that, but I said, I'm really salty. Let's see. It is scum covered. It's covered with a slime from herring spawn. Herring eggs make me sleepy.
Eating a lot of herring eggs.
Yeah, that's good. Yaaw. That's an important one because it's happening right now. They are beginning to spawn. Áax'w. They spawned on broad kelp. So dao is the kelp that you eat it on. And then da'a is what it's called when it's on the branch or on the thing. So dao da'a would be qauk on kelp. How da'a would be qauk on branches. And neh da'a would be qauk on hairy seaweed. Dao cut out the oh, we just did that. And a fun thing about dao is this is the wide ribbon kelp, and when it grows upwards and gets long enough that it starts to go across the surface of the water, it's called yaax'w dao. Did I tell you why? Anybody know why?
So what this is all about?
Yaax'w
Otters?
dao.
The otters wrap themselves in?
They wrap their babies in it.
Oh.
And they go get the food for the baby. Okay, let's see what else we got. To couch nuts, yaqaq. The qaq is starting to smell bad, starting to spoil. Try not to let that happen. áax'w. They tied hemlock branches together for herring to spawn on. How X'éig. They're going to tip the hemlock branches for herring eggs into the water from the canoe. They've been tied together and weighted and therefore tip over easily. Oh, there's a person I know named X'éig. I wonder if that's where the name comes from. X'éig. They wither when dipped in boiling water. Now we're getting repeat versions. I think we've seen all of these.
How would we talk about pickling herring eggs?
We were talking about this in cake just the other day. I think you would say Ḳéaláitz'w yaaw. They're going to put it into vinegar. Is that what you do to pickle something?
So, I don't know.
Okay, so
You said you eat pickled.
I eat pickled. I will eat pickled seafood.
Exactly.
I will eat nothing else that's pickled though.
So it's not bad to be educated about pickled seafood.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. And so, because we had pickled gumboots, so we had to figure out. So
Yes.
here's an interesting thing if we have any Kayaaní folks thinking about dialect, okay? And then also thinking about, so Ḳéaláitz'w. Wait, is my keyboard in Hawaiian? Is that an Okina? What are we doing here? Hold on. Yeah, it was, okay. Mai Kailoa, let's go Hawaii. Okay. The Okina has made an appearance. Okay, there it is. Okay. So Ḳéaláitz'w. Let's go look up this verb real quick. And then we'll come back. We're still looking for these herring eggs. To pull them off of the branches, like to eat? Is that what we're talking about?
Oh yeah, there was a question.
Okay. So here's
Yeah,
sour.
check.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying I checked Lear's notes too and couldn't find anything there either.
I don't know if we would have us like to just take them off to eat.
Oh, okay.
Maybe. If we don't find it though, Kayaaní is going to be in Sitka, so we can ask her. And Ḳéaláitz'w is here, and I can ask her. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so we're going to look up sour, and then I'm going to show you guys a neat thing you can do. So to be sour is going to be a state verb, right? And so let's go look up sour, then we'll go look up this verb root again. I'm just scrolling slowly. Okay, then I passed it. Okay, so here's sour. So you got X'éig, Kayaaní, Ḳéaláitz'w. The fruit juice is sour. Yaaw, it's beginning to get sour. So you do have Ḳéaláitz'w, and that could tell you a couple of different things. It tells you it's a zero conjugation verb. And so it also is one that's usually only describing a third person object, like an it, right? And so if we go to the dictionary and look up vinegar, do I have that? No. Ḳéaláitz'w. Okay. So Ḳéaláitz'w is sour, and Ḳéaláitz'w is the word we have for lemon. And I'm in trouble because I updated my computer and now my dictionary software doesn't work. I don't know what I'm going to do. But Ḳéaláitz'w is for something to be sour. So this gets us where we get this from, if we go back. So we have Ḳéaláitz'w And so káx'éexʼ means it is. And what this does, right? So káx'éexʼ would be it is sour right now. It's sour. Okay. And so one of the things you could do is you could take another one like X'éig. We could take another one like Kayaaní. And we could take another one like Kształt. Okay. So one of the things that we could do is we had learned how to put suffixes onto things, right? So here's hit, here's nusk, here's kate, here's keet, here's gooch. So if these things become possessed, so how do I say their house?
Hitty. Do hitty.
D, right? So what do I got to do here for spelling?
D-I.
D-I, right? What about nusk? It's going back maybe in a whole semester.
The school.
Nusku. So what do I have to do for spell?
G-U.
G-U. Cake.
K.
What do I got to do for spell?
Yaaw.
What about what's the last one?
I.
Just an I? I tone I.
High tone.
And keet. Keep. So what do I gotta do for spelling?
D-I.
D-I. And what about gooch?
Gooch. G.
Ooh,
J-I. High tone.
okay, high tone I. Okay, right? So there are rules, right? We learned all these rules long time ago about how to put this possessive. It's a relational suffix, right? It goes on, this is how you possess things in Tlingit. It's also how you can disconnect body parts, right? So you could have, of course, we'll stick with do, right? Do walk, and if there is an unfortunate incident, like we told this big long story yesterday, right here at this lake, long time ago, there was a village, there were these boys pointing and laughing at this little bird called Atayadi. So the bird comes at night, puts hiucha on all the people, plucks all their eyes out, and barbecues them with a totally different verb. Barbecuing eyeballs gets quach. I don't know why. But
Delicious.
if you take the eyeball out, it becomes duwaki. So it does follow all of these same rules, right? So there's a whole set of rules. It's an I, unless it's rounded, then it's a U. If it ends with a vowel, then you have to go YI or WU, okay? And if it's any type of U vowel in any sort of K, X, or G, that's going to be a rounded ending. Then it's the opposite of the vowel that's before it. You go high-low, you go low-high. That's how the relational suffix works. There's also a set of consonants that change. T to a D, CH to a J, TL to a DL, TS to a DZ, right? So there's another suffix, we call that the relational suffix. There is a very similar suffix that we call attributive. I gotta change my font, okay. So the attributive is gonna follow all of these same rules, except for one. Anybody know which one it won't follow? The tone one. This one is always low. So káx'éexʼ would be, and what this does in this case, especially works really well with state verbs. This is how you make that verb into an adjective. So what would káx'éexʼ be?
Sour water.
Sour water, which is also our word for
Vinegar.
vinegar. X'éig douche. cat. Kshatsini shawat.
Strong woman.
Kshatchani cake.
Strong smelling dog. Or stinky.
It's a white dog.
Mm-hmm. And then Tutlewutli ka. Tutlewut is strong-willed, or a person with fortitude. And then Tutlewuchi make those high tone, would be a stubborn person. Okay, so that's what the attributive does. So this kashetsuchuhin. So now you can have kashetsuchuhin. And then as far as what you do after that, I think you would have two, because it's technically in the water is tak, but if you have anything that's pickled, it's usually in a guka or some sort of jar.
Oh.
So you're gonna have two. So then you'd have two, whatever, right? So now you can have kashetsuchuhin tu tsikat, kashetsuchuhin tu shao. But I gotta check with some speakers and see if that's how they want to do it. I know there's the kashetsuchuhin in there, but then as far as because you wouldn't want to just say kashetsuchu whatever, because then it sounds like the thing got sour, right? Like it got spoiled. But here's a cool thing. So underneath this, I'm going to put a verb. Anybody know what? Well, this is. It's technically a noun, but it's from a verb. Anybody know what this is?
Electricity.
It's electricity.
I should know that. Kashuka.
Kashuka. Anybody know what the verb refers to? Let's go see. It's resource day, and we're still going. We got more herring to look for. Okay, so we're gonna look up shuk. We go down. We look up shuk. The only verb we see is to have cramps or to get shocked by electricity. So let's go look up cramps.
Is that exclusively like muscle cramps, or can you use that to talk about menstrual cramps?
It is for both.
Really? For both? One's much worse than the other.
Yes, but there's also other ways to talk about when you get the disniku, yes, because it's not like, yeah, I had a sore hamstring, right? Less, they're not the same thing. Okay, so here you say, Ḳéigʼ is your foot cramped? Gliuqatshiltin. Would you write that as one word now? Gliuqatshiltin. Ikuchteshuk. Watch yourself, you might get shocked. So that's talking about electricity. Okay, wait, now we got to bank the other thoughts. So the purpose for this big explanation is kashetsuchu, if you were from cake, would be kashetzichu. And kashuk, if you're from cake, would be kashiku. I don't think there's other communities that do that. So there's a couple of these verbs that change like this. I think you could say wasaqyanuk. But if you're from cake, I think you could say wasaqyanik.
It's a cake.
So there, some things when it comes to dialect are pretty easy to like sort of, they're like, this EI becomes an EE sound. This W becomes an M.
When I was being asked to try and type up after a cake speaker once, they said Unique, but not nuke.
And like
I
it
got the
sounds like
correction
the
real hard.
sick verb or something, like neek, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So our next place to wander around is into the verb notes. We are in here. Hold on. I was looking for Harry.
Mhm.
Where'd my little window go?
Something that is so treasured and happens every year, and we don't have a specific verb to pick it off.
Well, maybe we do. Maybe it's just not written down.
And we have specific verbs for so many things, like around halibut fishing.
Yeah, that's true, right? Well, we do have for putting, we do have a verb specifically for putting branches into the water. It's pretty specific.
And all the different verbs for cooking.
Yes, and then there is a verb specifically for cooking herring eggs.
Ah,
But you could cook other things that way. But for Tlingit, I think that was probably the only thing we really cooked that way.
Is that just
Put it in. Not for very long.
and given the Raven story about the hemlock and Raven, like, and how important it is to pick off the eggs from the branches.
Okay. Well, we'll look in here, then we'll look in the Raven book, and then we'll. So he traded herring eggs for the right to use the song. Qa-hook. Now hold on, these are not just herring eggs. What just happened?
hook?
Hook.
What's the hook part?
Dried herring.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
You can dry herring eggs. Well, now I don't know how it goes at tribal assembly these days. But when I was a delegate in the early 2000s, people who were running for high positions, they gave out dried herring eggs. And they got my vote. I'll vote for you. Well, maybe. If you're a scoundrel, maybe not. But I'd just sit there and think really hard about it. Dried ham, that's a lot of work. But okay, if you cause harm, I wouldn't vote for you. But I would probably take those herring eggs. Okay. And so the sentence here is áax'w yushe, which is actually saying they sent herring eggs either through an airplane, through the mail, and then it just says that song. So the trading verb is not actually in here. It's implied. Yaaw, to get cooks real fast, just like herring eggs. It's interesting. X'éig, herring that's rich in Ţéag, so it has lots of oil in it. It's a trading. Áax'w is soaking herring eggs. Áax'w again.
We use the soaking for pickling because that's what you do is that you soak it in vinegar. It just doesn't happen overnight. Well, I mean, it doesn't happen like an hour. It can happen overnight.
So káax'w tin.
But that's all talking about the process. Like, it would be a way to say the food to shorten it.
That's a good question.
I guess
I do have language questions today.
Okay. Okay, so we might have to ask. We have the pickle question to ask. So under soak. So the pickling. How's that? I'll turn it into a verb.
You're the one uncomfortable with it.
So we have soaking clothes. We have to be soaked, waterlogged. Soak dried foods in fresh water in preparation for eating. And we have to soak thoroughly, and then to soak dry fish. So I think this T is for specifically soaking a dry fish.
Well, why do you soak yaaw?
Hechasaku.
So if we find out why we soak chow,
Does that soften them? Does anybody know? Does it get them ready for
I would
cooking?
imagine, yeah.
Would it be like with some other shellfish, you leave them in water to, what do you call them, purge them? Some of
Oh,
them hold on to like dirt and other stuff.
that's a good. Okay.
I can ask my weaving teacher because there was a basket to do that specifically for shellfish.
Yeah, and when Mariah and I got married, we were gifted 40 salmon, and they were in a tub. It was an old tub, and they had hooked a hose up so it would run in and then drain out the other side. So that was also, it was soaking, but it was also rinsing at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah, 'cause
So did you put the fish on your wedding registry?
No, but that was like a bonus, and that was our honeymoon, which that was the first honeymoon. It was the second one, but the first one was to go put up fish, which was beautiful. But I should have, right? Our registry is in the ocean. It's ocean.com. Let's see what else we got. Okay, herring. Back to, there's our verb for putting the branches down. Herring rake, raking herring. Back to the having scum all over it after spawning. Jigging for herring, okay. And then I think we cycle back through. So I'm not seeing this. So that means we gotta make a note. There's a couple things we gotta go look for. And I will ask some people. One, pickle something.
both the process and then how do you call the food after it's pickled? Because like let's not end up with like the original word for cell phone and now where we're at now.
Right. Okay. Because I think Kayaaní is a very cute name for a pickle. But I don't think it's gonna stick. Because it means the sea cucumber of the woods. Which I think is funny. But I don't think it's gonna stick. And then, okay, so the process and the name, and then removing herring eggs from branches. Okay, we have our tasks. We'll go and see what we can find.
Because I grew up being taught that like as like a Tlingit woman, like I was judged at how well I could remove the herring eggs from branches and not leave any for my guests.
really?
Because we would remove it for a really, really high honored guest. We would take it off for them before serving.
Like in some cultures, like how clean the bone is after you eat something,
Mhm.
right? Like there's not supposed to be any meat.
And if you were making salad or anything else, there should not be a single tip in there.
Oh,
If you were good, if you had the patience and perseverance that I think a woman should have.
right. Okay.
What do you mean?
From the hemlock branches.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I guess leaves, but
Yeah.
tips.
Oh, we're gonna look in the Raven book and see. Okay, we'll look in the Raven book too and see if there's anything in there. I don't know if there is. And the Raven book is hard to do searches in because it's
Oh, yeah.
700 pages. But okay. Raven's herring rake. That is a Haida name. So just so we know. Okay, that's just a list of foods. Hey, herring. Okay. Herring gull. Yaaw, you yaaw.
He knows that instead of herring.
He knows that the herring are pouring into that place. He's gonna go in the whale and eat all those.
Oh,
Wait, he's gonna go over there and get them. I don't know. Which one is this? Yeah. He's quickly toasting them. This is like toasting bread. He's swallowing the oil of the herring. Okay. Just list of fish. Chasing herring, taste of herring. Whale's jaws open for the herring. Gonna eat the herring. I don't know if we're gonna get eggs on here though. Herring pouring inside. Or eating. Can we get into
just search eggs?
eggs them on? See eggs. It's just gonna be in English.
Sea eggs.
That was just in English. I don't know what that is. Okay, one more attempt. What do we get for eggs in the verb dictionary?
Oh, when I Google it, it brings up sea urchin.
Okay. Oh, that's who he was eating in that story. Awanese, or Audanese. It's to eat sea urchins straight out of the shell, raw. Broken egg. Cold bursts the raven eggs in the winter. Coho eggs packed in seal's stomach. Kahisi.
Oh,
Cooking herring eggs again. To discover awak eggs. Okay. Lay eggs. Salmon eggs. Ooh, do a hechwayan. Laying eggs or nesting.
oh, so cute.
Can you imagine having so much sa'i that you can dip your eggs in it and boil?
Oh, right.
Man, yeah, what a luxury.
The eggs are rotten. Hakwati with the tup. It means that they're decaying, dripping off. Back to the herring eggs. Smash salmon eggs by pounding. Herring eggs are starting to spoil. Spread itself out over its eggs. Tipping over, I think we saw that one. Wither, saw that one. That's it. The hooch. How dachaye yaaw would be my guess. So I just go to the yaaw verb.
The berry.
They just did it.
Oh,
There might be a way to say like picking it off.
yeah, but I feel like it's more meticulous than just.
Yeah, I looked at the like all the verbs for like picking, but a lot of those are like picking out, like picking your nose. Yee.
It's also like not quite a picking if you have the right technique. It's more of a
Yeah.
zippering off, and you
Yeah.
don't overcook it, and you can zipper it very closely off on each side depending on how thick the spawn is on it.
I wonder if it's removed.
Can you tell whose job it was growing up?
Yes. So there is a áax'w verb. So I wonder,
It's almost a peeling motion.
maybe. I don't know. We'll have to, okay. What is this? Oh, the eyeball has been removed. Okay.
The soccer's starting to come in too, if we're going to stay on this hot theme.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's take a break. Come back at 5 till. And we'll see what we're going to do next.
Sheesh.
Okay. And sheesh. So we're back to talking about verbs. So we had done a whole set of these, right? Really looking at a command, happening, happened, perfective, right? And then a future. So we're sort of looking at these and we're getting really good at predicting them. So the next phase in terms of looking at these, well, there's going to be a couple phases that I think we'll go through. One is we're going to look at what happens when they go negative, right? With the idea of not learning how to do this yet, but just sort of seeing, look, it changes. Just remember that it changes. You can't just put "Ḳéig" in front of a verb and say the same thing. Like, you just can't do that. But we'll look at some of the patterns, and we're just looking for pattern recognition. But then we're going to go through again and go one at a time and And we're going to start by changing the object and subject at the same time, right? So we'll start with like a verb that's very manageable, سخن, because it doesn't, you're going to change the object and subject. But we'll see what happens when you start, basically pick a subject. So we'll say, I love you, I love y'all, I love them, I love them all, I love people, I love something. We love them, and it'll just start switching and sort of going through. And that's where this phrase comes from, is because there was an elder named Kayaaní, George Davis, who was a lot of fun to work with. He was my go-to for a lot of different things. And one project we did, which was funded by Gold Belt Heritage Foundation, was I just wrote down every possible combination. I love you. And so we did the love verb, like all these possibilities. And it gets pretty complicated when you get into they all love them all. They all love us. That gets really, there's some moving parts in there. And then and his wife was always in the next room. She was such a nice person. And sometimes she would be listening to our work because it was a pretty small place. So I got through all the possible combinations. Right? I end up with the fourth person, which is I am loved, you are loved, we are loved, they are loved. And then I said, I don't love you, because we just went right to the negatives, right? And she goes, Ishan, I could hear her. So then we did, I don't love you, I don't love y'all, I don't love them, I don't love them all, right? But we were just doing the negatives to show what happens. And then he said, we got through them all. He says, well, you forgot one. I was like, what? He says, what do you think that is? I don't love anything, right? So then I found a picture of this guy because I was like, oh, he's a good representative of that verb. So we're going to take a look at what happens when we go negative. And for this one, we're going to do probably a little less predicting and just a little more just sort of observing, because this has a few different moving parts for it. But so for saying, and what we're going to get is what we call the prohibitive. So instead of the do it, we're going to get the don't do it. And the don't do it is actually really useful for this other kind of I think it's a rarely used verb mode these days. So it starts with Ǩéayání. Oh, does it have to be a 1,000,000-point font? Hold on.
Command minus will shrink your font.
Oh, will it? Okay. So it's going to start with Ǩéayání. And a lot of times I think what happens is we get a bit of a shortcut version of this. Because what the verb should be is it should say what looks like the prohibitive form of it. So this is X'éig, don't eat it. But if you say X'éig, that translates to I hope you eat it. And again, coming back to Tlingit, it's not about this thing, and it's not linking meaning, it's just linking patterns. I don't know how else to describe it. Sometimes you'll put a klesh on something, and then you'll get like hasn't happened yet, right? And so
that's a little bit confusing. So if we want to add slish or haste on there, we can't use the verb that we would normally use, but we could use the negative form in our regular phrase.
just for that Ǩéayání, like it starts with Ǩéayání, and that's why nowadays I think it has changed. I think a lot of speakers would say Ǩéayání, but I think it should be Ixaq, right? That's why if you go to beginning Tlingit, you'll see a phrase that says Ǩéayání, because you would say Tlishwutiq, which I guess would mean don't let it be that way. But you'd say Ǩéayání, I hope it's that way. So it's kind of there's more straightforward ways as far as like the logic to remember, you could say áax'w, and then you could say yichai. I hope you eat it. Okay, here I am making everything complicated. So same verb theme, object, subject, zero classifier, xa, zero act verb, right? So it's a zero conjugation verb. Because these are negative, our classifier now, I should just change this. It can only be zero. It will always be zero because it goes ya when it happened or became that way. So because these are all going to be negative, they're all going to be minus I classifiers. So always be minus I classifiers. So the don't eat it, we looked at already. Everybody say X'éig.
X'éig.
X'éig. X'éig.
X'éig.
Another thing that I think is shifting is a lot of people will say X'éig. Now I'm not going to say it's wrong, but I'll say shish is the prohibitive part. Shish means don't. X'éig is not. So we'll see X'éig below. And X'éig could be X'éig, X'éig, Hesh, Shesh. Could be any of those. If you go to Angoon or to Carcross, sometimes you'll hear Tish and Teslin. Okay, so now you get to I am not eating it. Keshwacha.
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 I think the next one will be X'éig. I'll be the guesser. Just see how I'm doing. X'éig.
Keshwacha.
X'éig.
Keshwacha.
X'éig.
Keshwacha.
X'éig.
Keshwacha.
If I said plus is oo, what do you think the next one might be? Plus is oo.
Ucha.
Kesh'éig.
Keshwacha.
Kesh'éig.
Keshwacha.
Kesh'éig.
Keshwacha.
Kesh'éig.
Keshwacha.
Okay. So what we should be getting for the negative perfective is, I think it's going to go long and low as far as the stem. The rest should be the same. For this one, the next one should be yicha and awucha. Okay. That's my prediction. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, hold on. Okay, never mind. It's a zero. Sorry. Zero negative has to be. Okay. Do I want to show you this? Okay. I'll show you this at the end. Okay. Keshwacha.
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 Keshyicha.
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 Kesh'awucha.
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 So in this case, not eating it now and didn't eat it are the same. That's not always going to be the case, but that's the case here. But then you've got e and y and u and awu. If you know how to build a future verb, you can build the negative. This is the easiest one. There's only one thing that changes, is the stem goes from long and high to long and low. So if you had kukkacha, you'd have, so kukkacha, keshkukkacha, Keshkukacha.
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 Everything's low except for kesh. So if you have, anybody remember what is you are going to eat it? Gaqi.
Kaki.
And then you have gaqicha, you are going to eat it. So what should we get for you're not going to eat it?
Keshkakicha.
Keshkaqicha.
Keshkakicha.
Keshkaqicha.
Keshkakicha.
Keshkaqicha.
Keshkakicha.
What about there, gonna? For a zero group classifier,
Aqua.
aqwa.
Aquaha. Aquaha.
Keshaqwacha.
Aquaha.
Keshaqwacha.
Aquaha.
Keshaqwacha.
Aquaha.
Here's all the parts in there. Every one of these has the irialis, the single U sound. This means there's some break from reality. And most commonly is didn't, don't, won't, right? But it's interesting though, because it's going to pop up in every single future verb. Because even if you say it's going to happen, it hasn't happened now. And so X'éig needs to have that sound in there. That's where that W sound comes from in every future form.
Why did we go from kle to kle when the English on the left changed this?
Wait, say that again.
Why is it kle ihak and not, and everything else is kle?
Oh, so X'éig is don't.
So
That's
just
what,
don't, but not didn't.
yes. So then Kesh is not. So then you say not eating it, did not eat it, will not eat it. That not in all of those, N-O-T, is Kesh.
Well, don't is
Is-
also not.
And
Well, yes. But the short form is ishi. Don't. So for X'éig, don't and not are different.
Oh,
Because for English, you really just throw don't in front of it, right? So you'd say eat it, go there, don't go there, don't eat it. And so don't does the work of it in English, but we need shish and the underlined K. Right, so that's what you're gonna get. Shish ach ishiq. Don't touch it. Right? Shishate ikotchik. Don't ever go there.
what is the difference between X'éig and X'éig?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
I guess there's personal preference.
Yeah.
Place, kesh, hesh, tish. Those are the ways I commonly hear that.
Tish.
Tish. That's mostly Teslin, Carcross, some Angoon speakers.
It's true.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Shish itanak. Don't drink it. And there's an it there, right? You could say shish atinak, which means don't go drinking. So here's we've looked at this theme before. There's an object, there's a subject. This is a D plus 0 classifier. We'll put the D there in that spot because that's where it pops up. You're going to say da. You're going to say tle. So it pops up before the L, before the S. This is also a 0 act. So when we go back in, we should be seeing pretty similar patterns as the last one. So this classifier can only be da. That is the only version of this classifier we will see in any of these forms. It goes di when it did indeed happen. So we saw this one already. And I think it was shlish itanak, right? Itanak, I think it was high. Shish itanak.
Itanak.
Shish itanak.
Itanak.
Shish itanak.
Itanak.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
I saw when we started this, one of you took a drink of something, rebel. Okay, so we should have Chwada, Ida, and I think we're gonna get Auda. Okay, that's what I think. We'll see. How well do I remember these things? Ḳéx'éideanach.
Ḳéx'éig.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Ḳéx'éig.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Ḳéx'éig.
So I think we're gonna get Kesh. Is it gonna be Idina?
Idina.
It's just gonna be Idina.
Ooh.
Or is it gonna be Yidina?
Yidina.
Like one way to tell.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Yidina? Okay. Kesh Idina.
Ah.
Kesh Idina.
Ḳéx'éig.
Kesh Idina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Idina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Idina.
ḳéx'éideanach.
I think we're gonna get Udina.
Wanaksa ich. And yeah.
So this is really interesting. So when you have plus cha, you get chwa. When you get plus cha, you get chwa. When you get plus plus cha, you get chwa. So the first person tends to be very similar between the negative perfective and the negative imperfective. For whatever reason, when you look at the second person, it's like, I will gobble up that Irialis, because that's just how I am. So then you have idina, and we should expect for the perfective, you didn't drink it, I would expect kesh yidina, right? Because that Y is on there, right? So the Irialis plus the I doesn't always, sometimes it just cancels that Irialis.
Oh,
But the perfective, it's gotta be there, that way we can hear it. I'm gonna guess. What's your question?
Would you just say Yena teach away? Like it's just that way. Like if someone was like, why?
In a teach. It's just always that way.
Okay.
Okay. Any predictions for this one?
Kesh.
You're gonna have da, na. Well, 0, da, na.
Audina.
Oh, then that's pretty good. Good prediction.
I think that's the next line.
What if it's udina? What if it is?
I'm going with Audina because I second guess.
Okay.
Or didn't do
Kesh
it.
udina.
I would have.
Kesh udina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh udina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
I'm just gonna chalk that up as a victory for me. Okay. So I think this one should also be identical. I didn't drink it. Kesh chodana.
ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh chodana.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh chodana.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh chodana.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Even though we're just starting to look at this pattern, don't assume that those are always going to be the same, right? Negative first person imperfective, negative first person perfective. Right? So this one I think should be Yidina. Yidina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Yidina.
ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Yidina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Yidina.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Donna Keith, I think you saw the feature for this one.
Oh,
Okay.
Kesh Audina.
Oh, it could go either way. We'll go Audina. Kesh Audina.
I'll count this as a win.
Ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Audina.
ḳéx'éideanach.
Kesh Audina.
Kesh Audina.
Okay. So we had da na, we had da na, and da na. Okay, so just flashing back to what we had there. We had da na, da na, But now those all have to get lowered at the end. I won't drink it.
Kadana.
Keshkukadana.
Makes
Keshkukadana.
Kukadana.
Keshkukadana.
Kukadana.
Keshkukadana.
Kukadana.
You won't drink it.
That one phrase makes me want to translate a personal story. When I was like a little kid and my all the dentist, because I had an abscess tooth, the dentist came over and they're like, hey buddy, I just need you to drink this. And I like took it. Nope. And the guy just and like walked back over to my mom. You could see my mom like, yep. And I had to drink it. They're making me drink it.
Well, that would, in that case, that would be kakidana.
Oh yeah.
I'll say it to my kids sometimes. Ituguklaan. You're gonna be kind. It's a future verb, but it's a command. Okay. What do you think?
Kadana.
Keshkakidana. Keshkakidana.
Kukadana.
Keshkakidana.
Kukadana.
The second person vowel. Okay, the second person vowel. It likes to stay short if there's a vowel in the classifier. If there's not, it likes to go long. And so does t, the first person plural. Okay. Anybody remember what this one's gonna be? They're not gonna drink it. This is what the dentist said. Say it.
Dana.
Keshaguchtana. Keshaguchtana.
Kukadana.
Keshaguchtana.
Kukadana.
So for the third person, future, if the classifier goes sa, it goes da, sa, sha, or sha, it has to have guch in front of it every single time. It must go guch da, guch sa, guch sha, guch sha. For all that, if there's no vowel, you're gonna get the kukwa or gukka. Here's all the parts. Same thing. Irialis, 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 irialis. And then you're gonna get the perfective marker here and the irialis. They tend to kind of combine, but also like the perfective is the stronger of the two, right?
I have a question. I still don't really understand what an aerialis is. Could you give me like just the bullet
alley?
points of,
Yes.
The
of
alley
what I
bully
should
points.
All the biggest thing it communicates is there's some break with reality.
know? Okay.
So it will be there. Every negative verb must have an aerialis because it's not that way. Every future verb must also have an aerialis because it's even if you say I'm gonna go there, you're not there. So there's a break with reality, right? So it's saying like it's just not there yet.
Okay. So it has like potential. But
Yes,
it's
it
not.
will be because it'll be in
not
all
the reality.
potentials. It'll be in all. It's also in any comparative verb when you say
Okay.
it's this big. That's why you say ye ku ge.
Okay. Okay.
So does that mean if there's no break with reality, so it's a reality, there would be a different marker instead of the U?
That means there would be nothing there. Like you wouldn't.
Oh,
So you just say ye ge. It's big, right? Shitzin.
okay.
It's strong. But then if there's ever a break with reality, like if it needs to say it's not that way or not that way yet, Or even like, it's kind of weird when you have it for like X'éig, it's a creature that's this small, right? So you're saying this isn't it, I'm just showing you it's that big, right? And so it just pops up, and then it's for all negatives and all futures. And it just has a fun name. I don't know. What should we call it? The not that way? The not that wayer?
Ḵ'éexʼ.
Ah,
Is the aerialis always a U?
yes.
Okay. That simplifies things a little bit.
Yeah, so you go like X'éig. So like here's an example that shows the aerialis, right? So you have X'éig. It's good. We'll just say it. That could also be they, but we're just going to use it for right now. And then okay, so now we get it's good. So the parts here, we have 0, we have ya, and we have k, right? So if we put Ḳéig in front of it, we're going to jump ahead here to what has to be there. So now we got Ḳéig, and this is going to trigger some things. The object will still be 0. In between the object and the classifier must come the aerialis. It's got to pop up. The other thing that's going to happen here is this classifier is ya, which is the plus I version, which means it is that way or became that way. So now it must go back to 0. It's a negative, so the verb in this case is going to go short. So when we put those together, we get Ḳéig. And you can say Ḳéig. What that means is it's not good. Good, not good. And there's a version of this one that is an opposite. So this would still be 0. The aerialis would still be there. The classifier is going to change groups, so it's a different verb. And then you're going to get Ḳé. And then you get Ḳéig. And there's a couple of these that have this to be that way, to not be that way, and to be the opposite of that way. So here you've got good, not good, bad. But then you see the aerialis right there, right? So it's got to be the and it's got to be there for the negatives. Good questions. Okay.
Do you upload the modified slide sets too?
Yes. Although for advanced Lingi, I was typing things and then just erasing them. Which is not fair, but yeah. But for you guys, I do. Look at it, you get such special treatment. Next
couple
year, I don't
more
know if
weeks.
I can't guarantee it for another year. But yeah, I do. But I don't. I erase the future slides so you won't have answers. But then all these notes that I put in there.
I understand that. It's okay. Just my question solely pertains to what you were typing with us,
Right there.
and everything else that you've done for like the past semester doing this.
It's good, or it's not good.
No, it's good that you're uploading the modified slides. I don't care what you do with the future slides you have not shared with us yet.
Okay. No, I do. So what I do is I do a save as. I delete everything in the future and I export as a PDF.
Finish.
And I delete it. But yeah, if you go in, and if you go into the folder of the slideshows, you could find all kinds of other versions of these too. Don't look for all the answers. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts? We have 2 minutes left. I don't think it's enough time to do another verb. I will say something about sometimes there's a little bit of unpredictability with the prohibitive. And I haven't quite figured this out yet. So the prohibitive is going to be one of two things. So if you were to think back to itna, you are drinking it. So there are some verbs which will take the second person imperfective. You're doing it right now. And then it'll throw shesh on the front, the underlined K on the back. And that's what you've got here. So you've got itna, goes to shesh itna.
For sure.
Right? You were drinking it, don't drink it. Some of them like to take, so X'éig, this gets a little extra thing in here. This has a suffix before the prohibitive suffix. Because what it takes is the negative repetitive it takes the repetitive imperfective for some reason. Like you could say X'éig. That means you cook it regularly. Right? And so that's why you get shesh X'éig. So just like when we get into like the prohibitive, it's not the most complicated, but it does have this sort of unpredictability to it. So for now, but you can, if you said shesh X'éig, I think people would know what you're trying to say. Well, it's X'éig.
Yeah.
Because this has an extra suffix. So the repetitive imperfective has a suffix. Which means you do it regularly. It's a little different than the habitual. The habitual is you do it all the time.
So that wouldn't be interpreted as don't cook it regularly? Or could it?
There's an argument out there that there's an interpretation here which is don't ever cook it. But I don't necessarily, I think it works that way. I just think it's like, don't cook it. Because like the way, the context could be, like if you had some fish and I wanted to make like sushimi out of it.
Or pickled salmon.
Yeah, if I want to pickle that thing or whatever.
Well, the only reason I ask is just because if someone was like eating something really bad for their health, like salt, a lot of salt, like don't eat that regularly.
Yeah. So you would probably use sheshechak. But there's some really interesting things with Tlingit, I think. Like if you were to say, I never want you to eat that again. You'd probably end up with forever, I don't want you to eat it. So you would end up with something like that. But also Tlingit generally doesn't like to get too bossy as well. But there's other interesting things too. Like I was trying to get an elder to tell me how to say I can ride a bicycle, or I can read a book, or I can do it, which English likes to do, right? I can do it. And every time they just give me a first person future. Like I'm gonna read it.
You're gonna do it.
I'm gonna ride a bike. And so I don't think Tlingit is really big on telling people what you can do.
Oh, can or
But you can manufacture it. You could say, Chosaku ade disiye. I know how to cook it. You wouldn't end up with I can.
Okay.
Which is interesting. And so for some of these things too, like if you were to tell someone, well, I don't know, I had to tell my kid, I don't want you to talk to them. And that was a forever statement. So sometimes you gotta make those statements, but.
Anyway.
Okay. You keka?
Huh?
Okay. Gonna teach you Han. Zuan Dakunyagi.
Sheesh.
Ganashish.
Keka.
Before you close on your notes, could you write down "don't go out drinking"?
Oh, okay.
Yes, I need to know that so I can tell everyone the night before we shouldn't be doing that.
Well, because I just recently found out that someone close to me cannot drink anymore,
Oh,
and they're very tempted.
yeah. Well, so you would
Normally, I
have.
wouldn't be big on telling someone what to do, but it's like the doctor said.
Well,
What else was I sharing with friend?
I guess you would say don't go drinking, but kish atitanak. And then, but there's another way, which is actually kind of okay. I think we're still recording. So if we go into the verb database, there is, which is somewhere.
Were we still recording?
Yeah, this is an important one, I think.
Fair enough.
Okay, here it is.
I just would have not said things.
Where is it? No, it's Safari. Hold on. Stop. That thing.
Oh, wow.
I'll show
I
that
forgot
thing.
that we started
Right?
there.
Yeah. But I brought it back around because I want to know how to say this phrase the night before such things.
There you go.
Right?
Okay, so there's
So it pickled.
a verb root doc, which on its own means for the precipitation to stop.
Mhm.
And if you get ita on the dock, sober up now. And that means, I guess you can interpret it literally as stop the precipitation around yourself.
Stop the precipitation around yourself.
Precipitation or participation?
Precipitation, like rain.
Precipitation.
Like you'd say, our dock, it stopped raining.
Would always be. What is it? De or de?
No, you could say ita on the dock. You could just say that.
But can
Da
it
on
be long version like de versus just
Oh, yeah, that's fine. We write them short, but they could be long. And then, so you could also say, áax'w ida áax'w. I want you to sober up.
How would you say?
áax'w
Oh.
ida áax'w. Or áax'w.
Why is it
It's like the hortative.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then there was, when I first heard this phrase, it was Kayaaní duda awadak, which is, nobody knows how, but they sobered up.
Well, but
But
I mean that kind of makes sense. I mean, the only person that can make you do that is you.
can the hortative be like a wish? Like, would that be something more polite to say?
Yeah, so, and you could also, this could be ida an qadak. Like that verb wouldn't change because this is one where we conjugate it with a relational pronoun.
Oh.
You could say akhta an qadak, let me sober up. And then you can also say I'm gonna talk carefully to them so they'll sober up. Give them a hard talk.
You should put that in the notes.
Oh, yeah.
That one you should put definitely in the notes.
Okay. Kedain do in you kotan do da an kadakit. I will talk.
I'm glad we're recording because I mean, like we talked about, telling people what to do can be touchy, but
Good day is be without it.
Like, you have to give people hard love.
yeah, but yeah, you know, drugs and alcohol is a whole problem. So I'm glad that we're going over it.
A good day is also one that you use in about talking about like lingo, the trauma too.
Yeah, right. So a good day could be without it. Right now, janak. let go of it. There's different things you could say.
So why is it precipitation?
Because you gotta sweat it out, or
Right? Because it's a really interesting, it's an
Maybe 'cause
interesting
you,
thing.
Like what? Maybe because you drink up and it drips or something. Like
Just, yeah, create some sort of dampness around you, maybe. Yeah.
Well, when we're thirsty, it's our head being dry, so.
Oh, yeah.
Precipitation into the body.
So that's the move.
oh,
To let up?
Like it's precipitating down.
Your esophagus.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it also means to come to your senses, right?
Oh.
Unplug my thing and I got the way that.
Okay, I gotta stop.
Okay, and is the your aerialis, is that in all negative verbs?
Yes,
Okay.
must be in all negatives.
Must be on.
All
okay,
negatives
okay,
and
that-
future.